Our chalice lighting this morning is called Legacy by Paul Sprecher. We light this chalice to honor the memory of those who have come before us, kindling flames of wisdom in dark times, willing to challenge orthodoxy even at great personal risk, giving us a legacy of freedom and a love of truth, a legacy that warms our hearts and lights our paths. Our gathering song this morning is number 347, Gather the Spirit. The words will be on the screen. Please keep your mics muted and simply sing along at home if you would like.
Gather the Spirit, harvest the power, our separate fires will kindle one flame. Witness the mystery of this hour, our trials in this light appear all the same. Gather in peace, gather in thanks, gather in sympathy, now and then, gather in hope, compassion and strength, gather to celebrate once again. Gather the spirit of heart and mind, seeds for the sowing are laid in store, nurtured in love and conscious refined, with body and spirit united once more. Gather in peace, gather in thanks, gather in sympathy now and then, gather in hope, compassion and strength, gather to celebrate once again. Gather the spirit growing in all, drawn by the moon and fed by the sun, winter to spring and summer to fall, the chorus of life resounding as one. Gather in peace, gather in thanks, gather in sympathy, now and then, gather in hope, compassion and strength, gather to celebrate once again.
Welcome to the First Unitarian Church of Des Moines. I'm Louise Alcorn. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I'm a church member coming to you from beautiful Elk Lake, Michigan, traditional home of the Chippewa and other Indigenous peoples. I'll let you see my view. It's pretty awesome. No matter who you are or where you have come from, you are welcome here. Whether or not you live in Des Moines or have ever physically been at First Unitarian. Or like me, if you're coming to Zoom church from vacation. Whoever you are, we hope that here you find thoughts which challenge you, welcome which invites you into community, and people to accompany you as you journey. Our pulpit guest today is Reverend Dawn Fortune, who presently serves our congregation in Galloway, New Jersey. Reverend Dawn is of working class Boston area Irish stock, and before entering ministry, worked as a newspaper reporter and editor, teamster, sheet metal worker, cook, and home repair contractor. They reside just outside of Atlantic City, New Jersey, where for fun, they make custom knives and subversive art out of metal.
Good morning. I'm Reverend Dawn Fortune. My pronouns are they, them, theirs, and I'm speaking to you today from the land that is the traditional home of the indigenous Lenape people. Whenever you hear a land acknowledgement, please consider donating $1 or more to support Indigenous organizations or Indigenous-led grassroots change movements and campaigns, and encourage others to do the same. I'd like you to please keep your microphones muted during the entire service. After the service, everyone is welcome to turn on your microphones and join us in the coffee hour breakout rooms. I'm going to challenge you this morning, and I hope you will work with me as I try to reimagine what justice means for peace-loving people like Unitarian Universalists. You might be rattled when we're done, but I promise you won't be broken.
Our special music today is A Change Is Gonna Come, which is a favorite of mine. The song is covered by an amazing musician, Mary M., produced by Davey Nathan and Theron Nefu Themester, and written by Sam Cook and Audrey Montong. The link will also be in the chat.
A change is gonna come. I was born by the river in a little tent, and just like the river, I've been running ever since. It's been a long time coming, but I know a change is gonna come. Oh, yes it will. It's been too hard living, and I'm afraid to die, 'cause I don't know what's up there beyond the sky. It's been a long time coming, but I know a change is gonna come. Oh, yes it will. A change is gonna come. A change will come. A change is gonna come. Somebody keep telling me don't hang around. It's been a long time coming, but I know a change is gonna come. Oh, yes it will. Then I go to my brother. Say, brother, help me please. But he winds up knocking me down. Back down on my knees. Oh, there's been times when I thought I wouldn't last for long. I think I'm able to carry on. It's been a long time coming, but I know the change is gonna come. Oh yes it will. Oh, a change, yeah. A change is gonna come. Oh, I believe.
Awesome. So, because giving should be done with a smile, here is this week's offering funny. Please feel free to blame Reverend Amy. A little UU girl asked her mother, "Where did people come from?" Her mother answered, "God made Adam and Eve and they had children, and that's how all mankind was made." A couple of days later, she asked her father the same question. Her father answered, "Many years ago, there were monkeys from which the human race evolved." The confused little girl returned to her mother and said, "Mommy, how is it possible that you told me that we were created by God and Daddy said we came from monkeys?" The mother answered, "Well, dear, that's very simple. I told you about my side of the family and your father told you about his." So that all sides of every family may continue to come to church together here, the morning offering will now be given and received through the link in the chat. Half of this electronic plate goes to the internal social justice programs of the church, and half to our faith and action partners, Planned Parenthood, and Central Iowa Immigrant Support Coalition. This is the last week for those partners before we begin with new ones, so please give generously. The church is not the building, but a community. As a community of human hands and human hearts, we come together to share our laughter and our tears, and to bear witness and minister to one another as we struggle with life's sorrows and celebrate life's joys. May we hold in our thoughts and prayers this week those killed in the deadly attack in Afghanistan, and all those lost to senseless violence this week. Let us share together now the names of anyone we know who could use some special care and attention. As we type their names into the chat, may the love of our community hold them all. May the light of our community shine on the broken places of the world. May the work of our hands and hearts support, aid, and comfort all those who hunger or thirst for food or water, justice or freedom. May we never look away when we are needed. May those who are grieving be comforted. May those who are tired find rest. May the broken places be healed. May those who are filled with joy and laughter be abundant. Now together we light 3 candles. 1 for the joys and sorrows we have shared. 1 for the names we have written. And 1 last candle for all the joys and all of the sorrows which are deeply held but remain unspoken here today.
Comfort me, comfort me, comfort me, oh my soul. Comfort me, comfort me, comfort me, oh my soul. Sing with me, sing with me, sing with me, oh my soul. Sing with me, sing with me, sing with me, oh my soul.
Our first reading today is an excerpt from Natasha Leonard's piece, Anti-Fascist Practice and Impossible Nonviolence, published in the online magazine, theevergreenreview.com. Between spells of January drizzle in the midst of scattered street protests, on a particularly bad afternoon in Washington, D.C., Richard Spencer got punched in the face. That morning, Donald Trump commenced his term as president with rageful nationalistic oration. Police penned in and arrested over 200 inauguration counter-protesters. The demonstrators, participants in an anti-fascist, anti-capitalist bloc, in which I had also marched, would go on to face a repressive array of bogus felony charges and potential decades in prison. By the afternoon of January 20th, protests were dispersed, gloating frat boys in Make America Great Again red hats ambled through DC's dreary avenues, and Donald Trump was president. Any silver lining that day was going to be thin, but there it was, gleaming, a sublime right hook to Richard Spencer's face. I didn't see it in person, but on a YouTube clip, which has now been viewed more than 3 million times. Spencer, a neo-Nazi who claims America belongs to white men, was in the middle of telling an Australian TV crew that he was not a neo-Nazi while pointing to the white nationalist mascot, Peppy the Frog, on his lapel pin. A black-clad figure, face covered, the unofficial uniform of our march that morning, jumps into frame, Deus ex machina, with a flying punch to Spencer's left jaw. The alt-right poster boy stumbles away and his anonymous attacker bounds out of sight. Within hours, it was a meme set to backing tracks from Springsteen, New Order, Beyonce, and dozens more. A thing of kinetic beauty, the punch was made for an anthem's beat. The punch was made for sharing. I had thought we could all agree. A prominent neo-Nazi was punched in the face. It was a good thing. I had miscalculated we. Please join me in 1 minute of silent thought, meditation, or prayer. Our second reading this morning is another excerpt from Natasha Leonard's piece, Anti-Fascist Practice and Impossible Nonviolence, published in the online magazine, theevergreenreview.com. I didn't consider at the time that most of the commentators weighing in on Trump's fascism, or lack thereof, presumed their position to be anti-fascist enough. Every argument was premised on the post-World War II a priori that fascism is an evil to which we are opposed. Some departure from or aberration of the socio-political status quo, something outside of ourselves. It's no accident that a liberal commentariat would focus on the sort of state fascism that reductive histories pretend was conquered by liberal democracy instead of crumbled in protracted war. But there's nothing so easy nor so empty as opposing fascism when it's framed as an unparalleled historical horror that could return. I took in good faith these professed concerns about the Trumpian specter of fascism, and I believed in turn that we would see a broad liberal to left acceptance of vigorous anti-fascist action. And so I advocated and continue to advocate for a response to perceived fascism that has enjoyed a history of successes throughout the 20th and early 21st century. I'm talking about the anti-fascism abbreviated Antifa, a militant, no-tolerance approach to far-right racist nationalism, the sort of strategy which is not new, but newly empowered and utterable. As such, I am talking about that messy, unstable, ever oversimplified category, violence, or as I see it, counter-violence. Our centering song this morning is number 1031, Filled with Loving Kindness. The words will be on your screen. Please keep your mics muted and sing along at home.
May I be filled with loving kindness. May I be well. May I be filled with loving kindness. May I be well. May I be peaceful and at ease. May I be whole. May you be filled with loving kindness. May you be well. May you be filled with loving kindness. May you be well. May you be peaceful and at ease. May you be whole. May we be filled with loving kindness. May we be well. May we be filled with loving kindness. May we be well. May we be peaceful and at ease. May we be whole.
Good morning. And I want to thank Reverend Amy for inviting me to join you this morning to share my thoughts on smiting and how it's not necessarily a bad thing. So Unitarian Universalists are not generally known for smiting. We are the peace seekers, the angry, gentle people that Holly Near sings of. We chant that each and all be filled with loving kindness, and that we be at peace, at ease, and whole. We are, stereotypically, perhaps caricatures, we are Birkenstock-wearing, sprout-eating, tree-hugging pacifist end of the liberal religions spectrum here in the United States. And while our shared and affirmed 7-8 principles may be lofty and legitimate, our delivery method has us on the verge of becoming irrelevant as a force for justice in the face of the 21st century version of fascism. We are resistors, yes, that is in our foundational DNA. It is the reason for the image of our flaming chalice. When Unitarian minister Waitstill Sharp and his wife Martha were smuggling intellectuals out of Europe in 1939, the flaming chalice was the symbol created to let those seeking safety know that it could be found where they saw the chalice. The Unitarian Universalist Association adopted and modified that symbol throughout the years, and it opens and closes many of our sacred events. But have we become too polite? Or maybe we've always been too polite. Have we forgotten as people how to call out what is evil and bad, to name it loudly for all to hear and denounce it in a way that is forceful enough to make a difference? I think there are a lot of times when we bury our best efforts under the toxic burden of good manners. There are some basic truths we must acknowledge. When people are not operating from a place of reason, trying to reason with them is like trying to explain parallel parking to a pig. All it does is frustrate you and bore the pig. Hate is rarely a rational emotion. Hate and fear live in the amygdala, it's back here. It's what we sometimes call the reptilian part of our brain. It is the ancient primitive survival part, where all input gets sorted into one of two categories: presumed safe, presumed unsafe. When a thing or person or an idea is labeled as presumed unsafe, millions of years of cranial evolution fly out the window, and the brain responds with the familiar fight, flight, or freeze response that we've all heard of and probably experienced. Often, anything that is new or unfamiliar gets tossed into the unsafe pile based on the binary function of neurons and the primitive logic of, if it cannot fit easily into the presumed safe category, then it must be presumed unsafe. Now, if you're a wild animal, that primitive brain function helps to keep you alive. Huzzah. But as humans, it really screws up our ability to learn new things. All things that are new or strange or unfamiliar are initially judged by that part of our brain as unsafe. And it is only through experience with those things that we learn which are safe and which are not. And that does not happen through logic. It happens through experience. The fear center of our brain must be overwritten with new information. And that process in itself is frightening, which makes it all the more challenging. When someone has decided that a certain type of people ought to be eliminated, there is no amount of reasoning that can dissuade that person from their beliefs. No amount of nonviolent protest is going to inspire within them a sense of compassion for those whom they have already judged as evil, unfit, or less than human. They feel no obligation to be nice to those they hate. In fact, they take pride in their perceived strength when they eliminate people. The term we've heard most recently for this is ethnic cleansing. The polite term for genocide, of course, ethnic cleansing. It relies upon the assumption that some part of the population is unclean and must be scrubbed away. You know, like Hitler's ultimate solution, as though there was a problem that needed to be addressed. Now, before anybody gets the words "not all conservatives" into your brain, I'm going to tell you to stop that nonsense and listen for a moment. There was a saying in Germany at the time of World War II that went like this: if there were 12 people at a table and one of them was a Nazi, but the others did not discredit him, then there were 12 Nazis at the table. We who are liberal and progressive and like to think ourselves peaceful warriors for justice, we like to quote all sorts of things from Dr. King's letter from a Birmingham jail. But the part we seem to skip most often is the part he addresses to white moderates. Dr. King wrote, "I must confess that over the past few years, I have been gravely disappointed with the white moderate. I have almost reached the regrettable conclusion that the Negro's great stumbling block in his stride toward freedom is not the white citizen's counselor or the Ku Klux Klanner, but the white moderate, who is more devoted to order than to justice, who prefers a negative peace, which is the absence of tension, to a positive peace, which is the presence of justice, who constantly says, 'I agree with you in the goal you seek, but I cannot agree with your methods of direct action,' who paternalistically believes that he can set the timetable for another man's freedom, who lives by a mythical concept of time and who constantly advises the Negro to wait for a more convenient season. Shallow understanding from people of goodwill is more frustrating than absolute misunderstanding from people of ill will. Lukewarm acceptance is much more bewildering than outright rejection." Oh, oops. Yeah, we do that. We are often risk averse. We prefer to negotiate, de-escalate, to reason with those who hate. I remind you again that there is no reasoning with people who are committed to staying in their reptilian brains. So what can we do if we cannot reason our way to justice? This is where the smiting happens. There are many methods for smiting, so do not think I'm going to arm each of you with a baseball bat and instruct you to go about smiting on the head people who are being hateful, however tempting or cathartic that might seem. Smiting requires us to do something publicly that we'd really rather not: judge people. See, not only are we devoted to peace, but we are also devoted to the tranquility of the sort Dr. King describes, where there is no tension. But if there is no tension, that means that injustice is going unchallenged. And challenging injustice demands that we declare there is a right and a wrong side to an issue. To be allies, we must be willing to make others uncomfortable, and that often makes us uncomfortable. We want people to like us. We're nice people. We don't like it when they're mad at us or deny us access to their reindeer games. Well, guess what? If we want to live in integrity, we must be willing to take a moral position and stick to it, even if it means people don't like us, especially if it means people don't like us. I am asking you, good people of Des Moines, Iowa, to stretch. I am asking you to be impolite. I know that's a challenge. I lived in the Midwest for a while, but I'm telling you that the culture of Midwestern nice is more than a little problematic when it comes to creating justice. Because that kind of politeness is the very thing Dr. King referred to. The sort of moderation that undermines actual justice and prolongs injustice. Our readings today from Natasha Leonard illustrate what the white moderates of Dr. King's lament are still a powerful force. And, Leonard argues, the prevailing voices in both journalism and academia today. The thought leaders in the US, as she said, presumed their position to be anti-fascist enough, and thus recoiled when the current Nazi poster boy, Richard Spencer, got punched in the gob in front of God and the live television cameras. The popular conclusion about the fall of European fascism is that it eventually crumbled in the face of opposition by the superior moral virtues of liberal democracy and American ideas of freedom and liberty. It did not. It crumbled and fell, oh yes, but it did not simply yield to those with the moral high ground. Fascism in the first half of the 20th century was destroyed through violence and war. It was beaten down with the only language that fascism understands or respects, and that is superior physical or military strength. It did not surrender. It did not be convinced by reason. It scrabbled and fought to the last and had to be thoroughly beaten into submission. And then the lingering pockets of fascist activity had to be rooted out and similarly destroyed. Yes, often by violence. Fascism rejects any form of compromise. The whole purpose is to eliminate entire sections, great swaths of humanity in pursuit of some delusional idea of racial purity. As I said in the beginning, people who are not operating from a place of logic and reason will not be swayed by logic or reason or evidence or science. In various justice movements in the United States, resistance is often framed in the argument that laws cannot regulate thoughts or beliefs. And that is true. Laws cannot prevent people from being racist or sexist or anti-Semitic or any other number of terrible things. What laws can do, however, is regulate behavior. We cannot make it illegal to hate people for the color of their skin or how they worship, but we can make it illegal to treat them poorly based on those criteria. We cannot change hate through laws, but we can make it uncomfortable to be a hater. We can publicly call out hate, name it, claim it, and yes, shame it, to make it uncomfortable to be the hater. We can smite. Not only can we smite, I say we must. And what does it look like to smite people in the 21st century? Richard Spencer aside, smiting is supposed to be painful. It is the stick of persuasion, not the carrot, but actually hitting people is still problematic. Although in some cases it does remain an option and even an attractive one. But instead we can find other ways to make hating painful for the hater, make it expensive, or more trouble to maintain than to abandon. I call this smiting through peer pressure. We must be clear in our rejection of hateful rhetoric and behavior. We must be clear in our boundaries and communication. This I will not tolerate, and these are the consequences if you insist on behaving this way. Boycotts are good smiting tools. I do not shop at places I know to be owned or operated by people who support fascism. And I'm not quiet about it either. I'm sure you're surprised. I make sure that I tell my friends and my neighbors why I don't shop at a particular place. And this is how we make hate expensive. We make hate cost people money. We make hate cost people their comfort. The comfort of friendships and relationships, the comfort of their income, the comfort they get from being respected members of the community. Keep in mind, we don't need to change people's minds. We're probably actually not ever going to do that. Remember the amygdala, that thing back there? What we're going to do is make it too costly, one way or another, for people to continue to hate, at least publicly. Let me tell you a story. I remember when I was an apprentice sheet metal worker, long ago, in my years before ministry. Now, in any group of people, there will be conflicts, there will be disagreements. And in the testosterone-heavy union to which I belonged, conflicts occasionally were resolved with physical violence. Being new and one of the physically smallest people on the crew put me at a distinct disadvantage when considering such a resolution to conflict. But no one ever bothered me. I was very clear that I was not afraid to engage in physical violence to defend myself, although I certainly preferred not to. I was also very clear that I did not need to physically dominate any opponent to win. I merely needed to make it hurt more than my opponent was willing to tolerate. I may not win, I told them. I just need to deliver an unacceptable amount of pain on my way down. Now, whether they understood my strategy or just thought I was crazy, it didn't really matter. The result was the same. They left me alone and never started anything that would lead to violence. So this is our strategy in smiting, folks. I may not win you over, but I will make it too painful for you to continue being an ass in my presence. Eventually, like using seatbelts or motorcycle helmets or condoms or any other life-saving equipment, it becomes natural and acceptable to behave in ways that to behave in ways that use those things, and to not use them is viewed as foolhardy and stupid. Smiting has its challenges and risks, though. When we hear someone talking about undocumented immigrants bringing COVID or some other such foolishness into the US, we can say very clearly that is not true and it's racist. We don't have to argue, because remember, arguing or reasoning will get us nowhere. We simply name it, identify it, and smite it with words. This sounds easy at first blush, but what happens when the person spouting the hateful stuff is a family member or a dear friend? This is where it can get dicey. This is where it can mean risk for us. This is where we have to be ready for people to be angry with us, to reject us, to no longer like or love us. You may not be able to get Uncle Frank to quit spouting his QAnon delusions, but you can say, you're not going to do that in my presence. And if you do, one of us is going to leave. Now, if you're at your house, you can bump Uncle Frank to the curb and tell him to come back when he can control himself like a grown-up. If you're someplace else where it's not your house, you're not in charge, you can ask him to stop. And if he doesn't, and if others won't make him, you can leave and make it clear why. Remember, 12 people at a table, one of them is a Nazi. If the others do not denounce that person, there are 12 Nazis. Natasha Leonard ends her piece in the Evergreen Review with a story of a conversation she had with her grandfather, who is a British expat now living in the south of Spain. She asked him if he thought it was acceptable for people to punch neo-Nazis. He replied without pause, "Who could have a problem with that?" Then he told her the story of his father, her great-grandfather, who had joined the 43 group, which was a network of Jewish World War II vets and their allies who battled members and supporters of Oswald Mosley's fascist group in post-war England. They thought they had eradicated fascism on the continent with the fall of Germany. But fascism was actually reorganizing and regrouping and trying to start again in post-war England. Oswald Mosley's group attacked synagogues and Jewish cemeteries around London. And Leonard writes, in response, the anti-fascists of the 43 group made it their business to identify, surveil, and physically confront, disrupt, and shut down fascist organizing in London and across Britain. They used knives, knuckle dusters, and crowbars. We're not here to kill, we're here to maim, they would say. The group disrupted over 2,000 meetings over 5 active years and is widely credited for neutralizing post-war Britain's fascist movement. We defended the community by making it impossible for the fascists to terrorize us, one member, Jules Konopinski, told The Guardian in 2009 when he was 79 years old. The group's militancy drew some contemporary censure from parts of the British Jewish establishment. But for the most part, its place in history is either overlooked or lauded by historians, Holocaust memorial institutions, and other anti-racist groups, end quote. Now, I strive to be a non-violent person. I loathe the idea of physically causing harm to someone. And yet fascism is beyond mere hate. It is an ideology of totalitarian nature. It's all or nothing. There's no reasoning with fascism, and there can be no compromise. How many burned out synagogues is an acceptable compromise? How many camps? How many police killings of Black men is an acceptable number? How many babies in cages is acceptable in a compromise? There is no compromise here, so we smite. When the carrot of attraction does not persuade, then the stick of justice must be applied. Peace without justice is capitulation. Amen. And I now invite us all to draw deep into our Crusader roots and join in singing our closing hymn, Forward Through the Ages, which is our Unitarian Universalist adaptation of Onward Christian Soldier. Please join in singing. The words will be on your screen.
through the ages in unbroken line. Move the faithful spirits at the call divine. Not alone we conquer, not alone we fall. In each loss or triumph, lose or triumph fall. Bound by God's or purpose, in one living whole, move we on together in the shining goal. Forward through the ages in unbroken line, move the faithful spirits at the call divine.
We extinguish this chalice created as a symbol of resistance against rising fascism a century ago. We extinguish it today, aware that its flame lives on in each of us, burning bright and hot, urging us always to action.
In parting today, I share with you the words of Robert Kaufman. We have come together to share our deepest concerns, speaking and singing words of inspiration and hope. We have committed ourselves to do what we can to ease the burdens of those who suffer, to stand for decency and compassion. We have pledged to work for a more wholesome environment for us and for all the generations that will follow. But these are just words. The hymns we sing are just songs. All our reflections are just idle thoughts. When we convert them into loving and responsible action throughout the week, then and only then will this morning become what we want it to be, a time of worship.